Part 3. When the Sky Turned Black. The sky over Sudan did not darken all at once. It darkened slowly, like a curtain being pulled across the sun. A dimming so subtle that at first people thought it was a sandstorm, nothing more. But it wasn't sand. It wasn't weather. It wasn't nature. It was smoke. Thick, rising, suffocating smoke, from homes, from markets, from schools, from the bones of cities that had stood for generations. The sky turned black when Sudan began to collapse. In Khartoum, the first explosion came before dawn. The city was quiet. The call to prayer had not yet risen. The markets were still locked, the tea ladies still wrapped in blankets, the buses still parked in tidy rows. At 4:17 a.m., the world split open. A bomb fell near the airport. The shockwave shattered thousands of windows. Birds scattered into the air. People woke up thinking the earth itself had cracked. For a moment, no one knew who fired the first shot, but the truth arrived quickly. The Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces had declared war on each other. In the capital, in the heart of the country, among millions of civilians who never wanted to choose sides. Khartoum had survived history, famine, dictatorship, flood, but nothing prepared it for a war between its own soldiers. Within hours, artillery thundered across the Nile, smoke spiraled above neighborhoods, fighters took positions on rooftops, and the city, once a place of poets and markets and laughter, became a battlefield. The SAF held the air, the RSF held the ground. That was the deadliest combination. From above came the jets, roaring monsters that ripped through the sky, dropping bombs onto RSF positions, but hitting homes just as often. From below came the anti-aircraft guns, machines that lit up the night with streams of red tracers. To the people of Khartoum, the sky became a ceiling of fire. Mothers covered their children's ears, fathers pressed against the walls, praying the next strike would not come for them. Grandmothers clutched prayer beads, whispering the names of God faster and faster as the explosions grew closer. One man said, "You don't sleep. You faint and wake up in fear." Every morning the same question echoed through every home. Who survived the night? War does not only bring bullets, it brings hunger, it brings thirst, it brings the slow, invisible deaths that happen long after the bombs fall. Within 2 weeks, Khartoum ran out of bread. Within 3 weeks, pharmacists shuttered their doors. Within a month, water no longer flowed in half the neighborhoods. People dug wells in courtyards. They boiled river water. They waited in lines for hours for a single jerrycan from a volunteer truck. Mothers rationed meals to 1 per day, some to 1 every 2 days. In some homes, the children ate and the adults pretended they weren't hungry. Hunger has a sound, quiet, painful, shameful, a kind of silence that feels heavier than gunfire. It was the soundtrack of Khartoum now. There was a school near the Blue Nile called Al-Huda Primary. Before the war, it rang with laughter. Boys chasing each other in circles, girls braiding each other's hair, teachers yelling at students who climbed the trees. When the war came, the school became a shelter, then a storage room for fleeing families, then an empty shell. But one child remained, a boy named Amir. Amir was 7. He had lost his parents in the first week of fighting, though no one knew how. Neighbors found him wandering the street, dusty and barefoot, clutching a broken toy car. He didn't speak for days. Not a word. Trauma had stolen his voice. He slept in the empty classroom, curled beneath a desk. A volunteer brought food when she could. Sometimes he shared it with the stray dog that followed him everywhere. One afternoon, the volunteer asked him softly, "Where is your family?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed at the blackened sky, and she understood. Everyone he loved was somewhere up there, in the smoke, in the darkness, in the place where bombs take memories. Amir became one of thousands of war orphans, children who grew up too fast, children whose nightmares replaced their dreams, children who learned the language of war before the alphabet. There was a time when Sudan's hospitals were not perfect, but they were alive. Doctors worked long hours, nurses joked in hallways, mothers held newborns with shaky smiles. But now, stethoscopes hung silent. Operating rooms were cold. Corridors were filled not with patients, but with debris and broken glass. War tore through the medical system like a knife. Generators ran out of fuel, ambulances were shot at, doctors fled or were arrested. Medicine vanished from shelves. Some hospitals became battlegrounds. Others became morgues. One, heartbreakingly, became an RSF base. And inside those ruins, people lay dying. A woman in labor with no midwife, an elderly man gasping for air, a child with shrapnel in her leg crying for her mother who would never return. A doctor from Khartoum said, "We stopped counting the dead, we only counted the living." War does not only bring bullets, it reveals the truth of human nature. Some rise, some fall, some become monsters. In parts of Khartoum, neighbor fought neighbor. One street supported SAF, one street supported RSF. Fear divided families, suspicion poisoned friendships. Men who once drank coffee together now pointed guns at each other. One elderly woman said, "The war did not just kill our homes, it killed our trust." But in the midst of the division, there were angels too. Volunteers who risked sniper fire to deliver bread, doctors who ran secret clinics in basements, women who cooked giant pots of food for displaced families. In Sudan, darkness rose, but so did sparks of light, fragile yet stubborn. When the sky turned black, families made a choice: stay and die slowly, or leave and die trying. They walked for days, through heat, through hunger, through rivers of fleeing humanity. Hundreds of thousands left Khartoum. Many headed to Egypt, others to Chad, some to South Sudan, itself a land scarred by war. At the border crossings, the line stretched for kilometers. Mothers with babies on their hips, elderly men leaning on sticks, children carrying bags twice their size. One father carried his paralyzed son on his back for 92 kilometers. He said, "I cannot save Sudan, but I will save him." Every refugee carried something: a suitcase, a child, a wound, a memory. But they left behind something too: a home, a history, a life they could never return to. As Khartoum collapsed, Darfur burned again. Not like before, worse than before. Entire ethnic communities were hunted, villages wiped out, men lined up and executed, women abducted, children chased into the fields. This was not war. This was extermination. This was a horror that echoed the early 2000s genocide, but with more guns, more fighters, more rage. A man from West Darfur said, "They want to erase us. Completely." His voice broke. His hands shook. His house behind him was ash. There were 3 stories that broke the world of anyone who heard them. The woman who lost everything. A mother of 5 watched as her home, her crops, and her husband vanished in one day. She walked 30 kilometers carrying her youngest child. She said, "I no longer have tears, only dust." The boy who dug graves. A teenager in Yala buried 47 bodies in 1 week. He said he no longer sleeps. He just closes his eyes and sees faces. The teacher who refused to leave. A man stayed behind to protect the children hiding in his school. He said, "If death wants me, it must come through the front door." Not all survived, but their stories did.
Sudan was not dying in one place. It was dying everywhere at once. In Darfur, in Khartoum, in Kordofan, in Gezira. Each region broke in its own heartbreaking way. The rivers ran quietly. The deserts stretched endlessly. The land remained beautiful, but its people were drowning in a storm they did not create. The world saw the smoke, heard the explosions, read the headlines, and yet the world remained quiet. Aid groups were blocked. Journalists were threatened. Governments hesitated. One Sudanese poet said, "We screamed until our voices died, but the world heard nothing." This was the darkest truth of all. Not the war, not the bombs, not the genocide. The silence. The silence that swallowed a nation. And yet, even under black skies, children still drew pictures in the dirt, still kicked footballs made of tape, still laughed when someone tripped or made a silly face. Children are the last defenders of hope. One little girl in a camp said, "When this war ends, I want to be a doctor." The interviewer asked, "Why?" She replied, "So I can fix Sudan." In her small hands lay the future of a broken land, a land that refuses to die. Every war has a beginning. Every war has an end. The sky over Sudan is black now, but no sky stays black forever. One day the bombs will stop. One day the guns will fall silent. One day the children will rebuild what the adults destroyed. Sudan is burning, but Sudan is also resisting, enduring, holding on. The Age of Ashes was only a chapter. The story is not over. Not yet.